Okay, so today we're diving into sustainable solutions for seafood waste. And, this is something that I think a lot of our listeners are really passionate about, and it's something that we were really interested in learning more about. And when we started digging through the material from GreenFlow Environmental Solutions, we found it's a lot more fascinating than we initially thought.
It is.
It's not just about...
It's way more than just tossing out fish bones.
Yeah.
Right. It's...
Exactly.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
We all love a delicious seafood meal.
Right.
But most of us don't think about what happens to the, quote unquote, leftovers after that frog leaves the processing plant.
Yeah.
And the reality is dealing with fish parts, oils, packaging, like all of that stuff creates a massive economic and an environmental challenge for the industry.
Yeah. And GreenFlow's website really does a good job of kind of painting that picture.
Yeah.
Of all that waste. They're not just talking about fish bones here.
Right.
We're talking fish parts, oils, liquids, packaging,
Yeah, the whole shebang.
The whole shebang.
It's a lot.
So before we even get into the solutions, can you give us a sense of the scale of this problem? Like, what's at stake here if we don't deal with this waste properly?
Yeah. Well, the environmental impact is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. If seafood processors don't handle this waste responsibly, you end up with contamination, nutrient pollution in our water,
right,
all of which can be incredibly damaging to ocean health and marine life.
Of course.
And that's why you have regulations like the Clean Water Act here in the U.S. to try to prevent these very issues.
Okay, so the stakes are high, both for the environment and for these businesses that are, trying to operate sustainably.
Absolutely.
Which kind of leads us to GreenFlow and their whole approach to tackling this. They talk a lot about tailored solutions for their clients. What does that actually look like in practice?
So that's actually a key part of their success. GreenFlow recognizes that a one-size-fits-all approach just simply won't work when you're dealing with something as diverse as seafood processing waste.
Right.
For example, a company that's processing shellfish, say shrimp, will have a very different waste stream than, let's say, a salmon processing plant.
Okay.
So GreenFlow will actually develop a customized waste management plan for each client, taking into account the specific types of waste they generate, and then finding the most sustainable solutions for each.
So for the shrimp processor, are we talking about finding ways to recycle all those shells? Because that seems like it could be a valuable resource rather than just trash.
You're exactly right. What we often think of as waste can actually be incredibly valuable. In that case, shrimp shells contain chitin, which is used in a wide variety of applications, from fertilizers to cosmetics to biomedical products.
Wow.
So GreenFlow helps companies like that turn a potential waste problem into a profitable resource.
Now, that's what I call a win-win.
Exactly.
So it's not just about getting rid of waste, but actually finding ways to use it.
Absolutely. This gets to the heart of what's known as the circular economy model, which is something that GreenFlow emphasizes a lot. So instead of that sort of linear take, make, dispose approach, the goal is to create a closed-loop system where waste is constantly being reused and repurposed. Fish byproducts, for example, can be transformed into things like fertilizer. And in fact, fertilizer derived from fish waste can be significantly richer in nutrients than traditional chemical fertilizers.
Oh, wow.
So this not only closes the loop on waste, but it can actually lead to healthier crops.
So we're talking about a more sustainable food system from the ground up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
That's incredible. And all of this, of course, hinges on making sure that these companies are meeting environmental regulations right.
100%. Compliance is absolutely essential. GreenFlow understands that for seafood processors, adhering to environmental regulations isn't just, a box to check. It's fundamental to their business model.
Right.
So they work really closely with their clients to help them navigate the often complex world of those regulations, ensuring that their practices are both environmentally responsible and profitable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cutting corners on compliance might seem like a shortcut to bigger profits in the short term, but in the long run.
Yeah, in the long run, it's a recipe for disaster. You risk fines, you damage your reputation, and ultimately you contribute to harming the environment that we all depend on.
Yeah.
And that's not sustainable for any business.
Right. Exactly. So GreenFlow outlines this very systematic process on their website for how they actually approach this whole challenge.
Yeah.
They start with a waste assessment and then create a customized plan.
Right.
And then they implement these eco-friendly processing methods. It seems like they've really thought this through. They're not just reacting to a problem. They're proactively designing solutions.
They've definitely got a really comprehensive approach.
Yeah.
I think one of the steps I find particularly interesting is their focus on those eco-friendly processing methods that you mentioned.
Okay.
For instance, they utilize a process called anaerobic digestion, which essentially lets them turn organic waste, like fish waste, into a source of renewable energy.
Renewable energy. So they're taking something that was previously considered waste and turning it into something that can power homes and businesses.
That's exactly right.
That's fascinating. Can you tell me more about how that works?
Sure. So essentially, anaerobic digestion involves using microorganisms to break down organic matter, like we're talking about fish waste in the absence of oxygen.
Okay.
This process produces what's called biogas, which can be used for energy, and a nutrient-rich digestate, which makes fantastic fertilizer.
So instead of polluting the environment, this waste is now powering homes and helping to grow food.
You got it.
That's brilliant. It feels almost futuristic.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it? And that's what's so exciting about this field. We're seeing all of these really innovative solutions emerge that have the potential to really transform the way we think about waste.
Yeah.
And for GreenFlow, it's not just about the technology, it's about the bigger picture. You know, they're committed to a larger environmental mission.
Yeah, their partnership with One Tree Planted really stood out to me. For every service they provide, they plant a tree.
That's awesome.
Which I think is incredible. It's not just about profit for them. It's about a genuine commitment to making a positive impact on the environment. What do you make of that kind of commitment?
Well, I think it's a great example of this growing movement of corporate responsibility. Businesses are recognizing that their impact extends beyond the bottom line. They have a responsibility to the planet and to society as a whole. And I think consumers are catching on to this too and are choosing to support companies that align with their values.
So it's not enough to just say you're committed to sustainability. You have to actually walk the walk.
Exactly. And that's something GreenFlow seems to really understand. They're not just talking the talk. They're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And it's not just the tree planting initiative. They're involved in a number of other really interesting projects that are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of, sustainable seafood waste management. For example, they're currently partnering with a research institution to explore the potential of using fish waste to develop bio-based plastics.
Okay, now that is seriously cool. So we could be looking at a future where the packaging for our seafood is actually made from the byproducts of the seafood itself.
Yeah.
That seems like a game changer.
It really does have the potential to revolutionize the industry. And it also highlights something really important too, right? This isn't just about what happens at the processing plants. The challenge of seafood waste, it extends far beyond those factory doors.
That's a great point. I hadn't even considered things like waste generated on fishing vessels, for example.
Exactly. What about the waste generated on board those ships? Or the packaging waste from seafood products once they reach consumers? It's a complex supply chain with multiple points where waste is generated.
So for someone like me who wants to be a more responsible seafood consumer, how do I even begin to navigate all of that? It can feel pretty overwhelming.
I hear you. The good news is there are resources out there to help you make more informed choices. Have you heard of the Marine Stewardship Council's certification program?
Vaguely, but a refresher would be great.
Sure. So they have this blue label that you'll find on many seafood products, and it indicates that the seafood was caught using sustainable fishing methods that minimize environmental impact. So that's always a great starting point for making more responsible choices.
So I can actually look for that label at the grocery store.
That's exactly.
Okay, that's helpful. Are there other things I should be keeping in mind?
Absolutely. One thing to consider is traceability. Can you trace the seafood you're buying back to its source? Do you know where it was caught or farmed and how it was handled along the way?
I'll admit that's not something I usually think about when I'm at the fish counter.
Yeah, and it's a newer concept for a lot of consumers, but that increased traceability often means increased transparency in the supply chain, which can be a really good indicator of a more sustainable and ethical practices. And there are actually apps that can help you with this too. Seafood Watch, for example, is a great resource. You can look up different types of seafood and get information on their sustainability, as well as recommendations for what to buy and what to avoid.
Wow, technology really is changing the game. So we've talked about what's happening now, but what about the future? Any predictions for what the future holds for sustainable seafood waste management?
Ooh, that's a great question. The field is constantly evolving, but one thing that I think is pretty clear is that technology is going to continue to play a major role. I think we'll see even more sophisticated systems emerging, potentially even AI-powered systems that can optimize waste sorting and processing in real time.
That sounds incredibly efficient. What about the overall approach to waste management? Any shifts on the horizon there?
Yeah, I think we'll see an even greater emphasis on those circular economy models that we talked about earlier. So finding ways to kind of interconnect different waste streams. So what might be considered waste in one industry becomes a valuable resource in another.
So a more holistic approach where we're not just looking at seafood waste in isolation, but as part of a larger system.
Right.
Got it. And I think this will probably require increased collaboration between, different stakeholders, fishermen, processors, tech companies, policymakers. Like
Either way.
everyone needs to be working together if we want to create a truly sustainable seafood industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Collaboration seems to be a recurring theme here. And this might seem like a bit of a jump, but it makes me think about the role consumers play in all of this. We've talked about the industry side, but what about us? What can we actually do as individuals to support these sustainable practices?
That's a critical question.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, consumer demand has incredible power to drive change. When we as individuals start demanding more sustainable products and practices, businesses pay attention.
So what are some concrete steps we can take besides, the apps and certifications that you mentioned? What else can we do?
Well, I think one of the most impactful things we can do is simply be more mindful of our seafood choices. So opting for sustainably sourced seafood, even if it means, paying a bit more, sends a clear message to the industry that we value these responsible practices.
It's about putting our money where our mouth is, right?
Exactly. Supporting companies that are prioritizing sustainability through our purchases and our voices can have a ripple effect throughout that entire supply chain.
So every purchase is a chance to cast a vote for the kind of world we want to live in. But beyond that, are there other ways we can use our voices to make a difference?
Absolutely. Don't underestimate the power of simply talking about these issues. So start conversations with your friends and family about sustainable seafood. Ask questions at your local fish market. Share information on social media. The more we raise awareness, the more we can create that demand for change.
It's like that old saying, like, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Right.
But in this case, it seems like there are a lot of ways to be part of the solution when it comes to seafood.
Absolutely.
And, it's inspiring to hear about all these advancements and the potential for positive change, but I have to admit, sometimes it's hard to stay optimistic when you look at the scale of the environmental challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed. But, I think it's important to remember that we've overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges before. And in this case, we're not starting from scratch.
Right.
We have the technology, we have the knowledge, and most importantly, we have a growing movement of people who are really passionate about protecting our planet.
That's a good point. Sometimes we just need a reminder that we're not alone in this. There's a whole community of people out there working towards the same goal.
Exactly. And each one of us has a role to play. Whether you're a fisherman, a scientist, a business owner, or simply a seafood lover, your choices and your actions can make a difference.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
That's it, exactly. The choices we make about the seafood that we consume, they have ripple effects that extend far beyond our own plates. They impact the health of our oceans, the livelihoods of fishing communities, and the future of our planet.
Wow.
But those choices also have the power to create positive change. By supporting sustainable practices, we're not just buying a meal, we're investing in a healthier future for everyone.
That's a powerful way to think about it. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the world of sustainable seafood waste, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
If I had to pick one, I think it's this. Don't underestimate your own power as a consumer. Your choices matter. Your voice matters.
Right.
By educating yourself about sustainable seafood, asking questions, and supporting those businesses that are doing the right thing, you can be a really powerful force for change.
It's about understanding that sustainability isn't just a buzzword. It's a responsibility that we all share.
Exactly. And it's a journey that we're all on together. There's always more to learn. There's always room for improvement. But by working together and making conscious choices, we can create a future where both people and the planet can thrive.
Beautifully said. Well, on that inspiring note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing your incredible knowledge with us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of sustainable seafood waste. We hope you learned something new and, more importantly, that you feel empowered to make a difference. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep making choices that create a more sustainable future for all.